Thank you, Tina, so much, and thank you to the sponsors. What are you talking about? I mean, it just took an email. I mean, I actually was really, really sorry that I couldn't be at the big party because I was out of town, because otherwise I would have been there too. But I love Swiss Miss very much, and I love the power that it has to really spread the word, because the design community has really become so strong. I would like to talk to you today about this, these 16 years in New York City and what I've seen happen in the design world. And then I would like to introduce to you the next show that Kate Carmody and Sheena Gentiluomo and I are working on together with Alma Zevi, our current intern, because I think you're the perfect group of people to help us with that. So 16 years in New York, coming from Milan via Los Angeles. It was really interesting because, you know, Milan is the so-called world capital of design, but it's a very specific type of design. And what I realized soon enough was that different places in the world have different strengths. It's almost like default strengths. So Milan has design. When you go to the hairdresser, you find people as magazine and so on, and then domus and abitare. So it's a common water cooler kind of discussion together with football, you know. So it's interesting. Design belongs to the people, is for people to discuss. They are outraged when Cartel comes out with a chair they don't like, and we talk about it. It's very funny, but it's the kind of normalcy that makes it so that we're called like really great at design. No, it's just what we breathe. And there's also bad design and really bad taste. So it's about normalcy, good, bad, everyday life. I came to New York and I realized that design was really in trouble. Because, you know, the only way to get so-called good design was almost to commit an expiation of being American and going to Soho and buying European stuff for 10 times what it costs in Europe. That's what I found when I came to New York. It was this strange complex of inferiority that probably the American culture brings with it since the 18th and 19th century, when so-called American aristocrats were importing French patterns for furniture. And it's really interesting because American design is exceptionally strong, maybe not at cute chairs, but definitely at the kind of utilitarian design that really makes the lifeline for so many people around the world, and at communication design. But what I realized was that the strength of New York City in particular was contemporary art. In Italy, we get taught contemporary art that stops at Dada. True, when I went to architecture school, that was contemporary art. And instead, we come to New York, and at that time, you might know Lita Talarico. She's the co-chair of the SVA MFA program. She's my oldest friend in New York City, and at that time, her son Julian was 3.5, and it was 1989, more or less. They were living in Soho, and Julian would take my hand and bring me to the elevator, take me downstairs, and cross the street to go to the Pace Gallery because he wanted me to see this like really obscure, dark Julian Schnabel totems. So that's the kind of normalcy that I'm talking about, the default normalcy. Then you go to other parts of the world, you go to Latin America, the default thing is architectural modernism. If you ask a contractor in the country to build you a house, it comes out modern and kind of tasty. I mean, it's tasteful, sorry. So, maybe it's even tasty. So different places have different strengths. And when I got to New York, I noticed that since I have this great advantage of being part of so many worlds, you know, I graduated in architecture, found out early enough that I was really a bad architect, so decided to go into magazines, writing and curating. So I knew a lot of architects, I knew a lot of designers, both graphic and product designers. At that time, the world was simple, it was graphic and product. And I noticed that these three worlds were really apart. They wouldn't talk to each other. I remember that ICFF was really small and very grassroots, but that was the time also in '94 that you had beautiful stores like Terminal NYC on Watt Street, run by two Turkish women, where Toby Wong, who just recently died, my beloved Toby, used to show. So it was at the same time very much grassroots and very disjointed and disorganized. In these past 16 years, I've seen lots of things happen. It's kind of interesting to synthesize them all for you this morning. But I feel that the advent of the computer, you know, the digital design becoming normal, another kind of normalcy, and one or two different crises, both, you know, the World Trade Center attack and also slumps in the economy, have brought these different communities together in a very interesting way. And you, communication designers, are at the center of it all. In the sense that many architects, some people told me that this generation of architects, and in architecture, young architects are 50 because that's why I didn't become an architect. So this generation of architects is almost lost because it went through so many different slumps that only super established 70-year-old architects get to build. And instead, this generation in the middle has found itself really almost in a vacuum. And so what have they done? They have transferred their three-dimensional, four-dimensional skills onto the world of digital and communication design. There's quite a few architects that are your rivals, you might not, competitors, you might not know it, but they've opened offices that deal with what you deal. And at the same time, product designers, because of an increased environmental responsibility, have to think naturally 3 times before putting out another piece of things. They have to make sure that it's necessary. Of course, it takes a while before you get to educate your clients to be as economical and responsible, but still, we've seen a decrease in objects too. It's not only environmental responsibility, it's also the fact that companies like Apple have elevated the threshold of acceptance of design quality by the public. Oh my God, I'm packing so much into this kidney pie, but you'll notice that in 16 years, our design world has changed tremendously. Much more interdisciplinarity, much more conversation, much more experimentation by force of necessity, because sometimes we don't have work by clients, so we experiment. So altogether, whether it's romanticized or not, it's a great moment for design. Really, really a great moment. And it's a moment where the powers that be, being the people that have money, whether it's government or companies or corporations, are understanding that design is a force to be reckoned with. It's a force that means good business, but it also means good politics and good image building. So design is finally getting to the center stage, and it's something that we've been really waiting for a long time. What has happened at the same time is that the education of design has also changed. When I came to New York at that time, there were the same schools that exist today, but they were kind of monolithic or oligolithic. There were just few big, I hate that word, but let's use it, siloed. So, and they were quite separate. Like at Parsons, you had furniture design, architecture, communication design, same at Pratt. Columbia only had architecture, and it was straightforward architecture, even though they were not building, it was all conceptual. NYU had ITP, but that was pretty much it. Think about how it is now. SVA is churning out MFAs once a month. It's like, it's wonderful. I mean, they are coming out, well, of course there was the MFA about 10 years ago or more, and then, the Decrit, all the different branches. Parsons, after opening the digital lab, also right now has a course called Transdisciplinary Design run by Jenner Hunt. Pratt is also diversifying. Columbia is thinking of a project that I cannot announce right now because they told me yesterday it's secret, but it's going to be quite groundbreaking and right up your alley. So it's obvious that designers are showing that the only way to go ahead in this world is to become a really curious octopus. The chimp is a great analogy, but octopus are also great. I remember buying an octopus at FAO Schwartz many years ago, like a stuffed octopus, a gorgeous one. And I felt that not only was it cute and wonderful, but also it represented really the way I wanted to live intellectually in my brain, and the way I wanted to preach to everybody design. So I won't go too far into this whole disquisition, because I think that this is a conversation and a dialogue, and I hope that you will have many questions. But just to make a very quick narration of the arch of these 16 years at MoMA, since, as I told you, what I noticed right from the start is that design in 1994 didn't have the center position that I felt it should have in the cultural world here in New York, and also sometimes in the museum. Battles are always nice to fight. Then I started out with an agenda that was kind of hidden, very stealthy, but at the same time hopefully powerful. And the first show that I organized was called Mutant Materials in Contemporary Design, and it was a show that was meant to display the use of new advanced materials like composites and resins that can be cured at ambient temperature. Just a very sexy exhibition showing a very deep concept, which is that of designers possessing the tools to customize and design not only objects but also materials. So slowly but surely, it was about power to designers. It's like one exhibition after the other. I'm not going to mention them all, but they were exhibitions that, because of the feedback that I was getting from the design world, managed to be in touch with what people needed. There was one called WorkSpheres that was at the time of the so-called digital revolution and of the dot-com boom. So it was at the time when we were all uncomfortable with the promise of wireless technology that never worked, or we would travel and we could call into the server at home, but we always had the wrong plug and the server was not connected. So it was a time of great promise and great frustration. And then before September 11th, we were working on a show about emergency equipment, which we canceled when September 11th happened, and then we organized again 4 years later. That was called SAFE, and so on and so forth, until Design and the Elastic Mind. I suppose that many of you have seen Design and the Elastic Mind, and I feel a little embarrassed showing slides from it, so this morning I'm not going to talk about that. But that show was an amazing gift. It was my favorite show ever, because until 2 days before it opened, I and Patricia Juncosa, the person working on it with me, could not, well, she could sleep. I could not sleep at night. Patricia is much more serene than I am. I could not sleep at night because I was terrified that it would be a big flop. Why? For many different reasons, but also because it was left unfinished. And that was a big lesson. So the concept was design and science coming together, experimenting, producing not objects but sometimes scenarios, certainly not products, but ideas that would provoke dialogue or that would plant seeds in people's minds about the possible consequences of the impact of new technology, not only in design but in society. And that was quite amazing, because what kept me up at night turned out to be kind of the success of the show. I should have learned it before from certain architects. Architects have a mania for unfinished projects. They love their projects until they're construction sites, and then they don't want to have anything to do with them anymore when they're finished. If you look at the New York Times building, I love it because it looks like the rebars are still out. It looks unfinished, and I can read in that the desire of Renzo Piano to never end it, to never finish it. Not to mention the old Frank Gehry, when he was making his own customized house in Santa Monica, which was a mess, and the neighbors were calling the city all the time because it was all chain link fences. It looked like a construction site, but that was the real thing. So the truth is that if you leave an exhibition slightly unfinished, you leave the public a chance to finish it on their own and to give you feedback. You learn a lot from it, and the engagement and involvement that the public has is a gift to them and a gift to you. So that show I'll never forget, and taught me and Patricia and the whole museum a lot about how much you should trust your public and how much you should really leave something for them to do. That said, I would like to bring you on to our next experiment, which is the exhibition that we're going to organize for next year in July. That's called Talk to Me. See, Talk to Me, Conversation with Tina. Talk to Me is an exhibition about the communication between people and objects. So it's really about you. The idea behind it, the idea behind Design and the Elastic Mind was that designers are fundamental to the evolution of society, because great innovations happen perhaps in science and in technology, but designers are the ones that make them into life, so that you and I can use innovation. Otherwise, who cares? And then there are many examples, from microwave ovens to the internet and so on and so forth. The idea underneath, behind, around, embracing Talk to Me is that objects talk with us, whether they are interfaces or physical objects. They always have, even in centuries past. But now it's a much more overt dialogue. We're more conscious culturally of the necessity of a dialogue. And designers are the ones that write the initial script over which the conversation will be improvised. So, as always happens with these shows, we're in the phase where we're gathering a lot of materials and we are shaping the ideas for the show. Shows like this cannot have a checklist that's ready a year in advance. They can only have a process. And the process we're following right now is to have, it's kind of a new thing for us, but we have a blog, and you should please visit it if you don't mind. It's at moma.org/talk-to-me, one word. And that's where we show our curatorial process. We show to you the queue of the objects of the projects that are sent to us, that we look at. We don't tell you when something is canceled, it just disappears. And instead the ones, come on. And instead the ones that makes it into the more official queue are there. We show you our considerations, our research, what we're reading, and we gather ideas from other people. It's an experiment, but frankly, it's what we've always done. We're simply collecting it in a blog. The first step for any show of this kind is to send an email to everybody we know, including our doctors, just everybody, because it's about the real world, and to say, this is the show, do you have any ideas? And then it's up to us to filter these ideas, and the way a show comes together is that the first selection is kind of qualitative, and then it becomes much more of a real shaping of the room and a real balancing act between humorous, serious, dramatic, three-dimensional, two-dimensional. It's a whole process that we would like to share this time. So to give you an idea of the beginning of this show, I'm going to show you some of the objects that we have already kind of selected for this big minestrone that then will become the show. We won't go too much into history, just a little bit with some of the milestones that help us really make a point about what communication between people and objects is. One of my ambitions has always been to do a show with the Met and the Peabody Museum in Boston and show how modern design happened in the antiquities, how it is an attitude towards the design process and not a style. So one day maybe we will, but it would be kind of great if we could find a Greek artifact and we could show it and as an example of communication, and I'm sure we would. But so a few milestones to show, to prove that objects always talk to us, and then we will get into instead contemporary times. So among the historical ones are the barcode and the nutrition facts. Of course, the barcode is mediated in terms of communication by another machine, and so are the RFID tags, but it will become more and more seamless. Nutrition facts are much more explicit. The World Wide Web, of course, is something that we need to show because the internet went from lines of code to an interface that everybody could use with buttons and hyperlinks and windows, and that was the work of Mosaic and Tim Berners-Lee. So we need to credit some of these examples, just like we need to credit Xerox PARC for its first graphical user interface that was then co-opted by Apple and became the operating systems all the way until 9. And then we're going to show, of course, examples of visualization design that you have already seen in Design and the Elastic Mind, such as, we're going to show visualization design is such an important field for the future because the more the capacity of computer increases, the more we need people to make sense and render this data. So many of you are already working in this particular field, and here are some of the classic examples, of course, Ben Fry's examples, and also examples that are much more connected to scientific data visualization. Other important pieces from Designing the Elastic Mind that are actually now in the collection of MoMA are Martin Wattenberg, Marek Balczak, and this is where Fernanda Viegas is. So that's only Martin and Marek, and that's the way a computer thinks. I don't know if today you have time to go into the galleries afterwards, but these are on display. There's an exhibition that's called Action Design Over Time that shows design that has a dynamic cycle of life cycle. So this is also one. So that's how a computer thinks when it plays chess with itself. And this instead, the slide here renders it a little bit too bright. But when you see it in reality, it's like a beautiful Missoni tapestry, and it's a rendering of the editing wars on different Wikipedia entries from a few years ago, but it's quite beautiful. In the exhibition, we had two very controversial entries. One was chocolate that had nice zigzags. This one, instead, really much more of a war is abortion, so two controversial entries, and the colors are the editors, the peaks are it's over time, so you see the peaks is when they kept correcting each other really wildly, as a war. Now the whole rules of Wikipedia have changed, so you can't have these fluctuations anymore, but it was beautiful to crystallize a certain period in time like that. These were other examples from Design and the Elastic Mind that are also displayed in the galleries. The New York Talk Exchange was from the MIT Media Lab and showed all of the IP and cell phone conversations in and out of New York City at different times of the day. And you could zoom in all the way to different areas of town. So for instance, in Queens, it was fantastic to focus on to Queens because you would see different parts of Queens starting to talk with different parts of the world depending on the time zone. So it gives you, it's an idea of having a different view of the world that is about people, it's about communication. We all know, but this is a gigantic change in perception. And in fact, at the time of Design and the Elastic Mind, Adam Bly, who's the founder of Seed magazine, the science magazine that is quite great, and I were collaborating, and we had as a dream to redo Powers of 10, the famous Charles and Ray Eames video, using the idea of scale and the perception of today. Because what are we going to do? I mean, it has to kind of expand, it has to be like a toroidal probably, or maybe we have to talk to physicists and get into string theory to really show what perception is like today. So here you have also flight patterns, that is Aaron Coblin and others, that shows all the flights over the territory of the United States. So when you speed it up, you see the states coming into shape because of the different flights at different times of the day or night. And then I Want You to Want Me, which is a Jonathan Harris and Seb Kamvar production that was about looking at all the dating sites on the internet and gathering them in this like pretty cute. It was kind of politically incorrect though, because all the guys are blue and all the girls are pink, which I don't think renders reality, but still, it's quite a beautiful way to look at the worlds of people looking for each other on the web. To me, one of the most important pieces in Design and the Elastic Mind in terms of proving to the world the power of design was this, which was the Architecture and Justice Lab that's led by Laura Kurgan at Columbia University. You might remember it's the $1 Million Blocks. And I remember, okay, let me tell you what it is first. Data from the government proved that the either federal or city government spends for certain blocks in cities of the United States more than $1 million a year to keep certain felons out of society. So it's not about reintegration. It's either keeping them in safe houses, not halfway houses, or keeping them in prison. So it's basically a lost investment, a lost cause, right? You can read this data. Only in Brooklyn there are 375 of these blocks. So you can read this in a newspaper and say, you're outraged for 20 minutes and then you go. But when somebody puts it on a map in blood red, it's something that remains engraved in your mind. And I remember we have the education department here at MoMA is quite great. They have programs for everybody ranging from the normal ones like families and so on and so forth to the, normal is not right, but different needs. Like we also have an amazing Alzheimer art therapy program that is really outstanding. And then there's different, we used to have a remote teaching program with convicts in prisons, which I loved, and it was really, they loved design. And I used to do it like once every other week, but then the funds got cut, and so we had to stop this. And then we have a lot of programs for inner city schools. So I remember once watching a group of about 35 kids from an inner city school in East New York looking at this, and the teacher explaining it to them, and they were like, their jaw dropped. Now, it was about their life, and they saw it finally rendered in an elegant, effective, almost like militant way. And the same reaction you got from people on the other side of the fence, just it was about communication and how to show really the power of design, putting together architecture and design in a joint venture. Now, of course, here we go to really talk to me. One of my favorite websites ever is ThereRoom. You might remember it from 2004. It hasn't been updated. But it was a website that by Josh On that connected all the different boards, trustees and ruling boards in different corporations and government entities in the United States. So you would see the incestuous relationships between, say, Fannie Mae and other corporations. So it was really like a political instrument. It was about data, real data, but it showed something that had remained hidden, at least hard to grasp until then. So the power of design and the power of the internet to connect the dots and really give us what would be great reporting journalism or great reporting design is undeniable. And I would like, right now I'm reading a really amazing book about Blackwater, you know, the mercenary army that had such a big role in Iraq. And every page that I read, I wish that a designer were there adding to this diagram, you know, so it would be even more powerful. I was telling you how some architects what's the plural, what's the past of dive, you know, have dived into communication design. This is Diller Scofidio and Renfro. And what you're seeing here is a splattered image of a round theater that was at the Fondation Cartier in Paris, in the occasion of an exhibition called Native Land, organized by Paul Virilio. They had done 5 different renderings of migrations around the world. They were rendering migration that was due to rising waters, you know, like 3 feet of rising waters, the migration. Then they were showing historical migration in the 20th century because of war or other natural disasters. Then they were showing the money movement around the world in terms of sending back money home every day. It was quite powerful. They had worked, not for this installation, for another one with Ben Rubin. They always work with experts. But it's interesting how, once again, a coming together of different design expertise is beneficial to the incisiveness of design. In Talk to Me, we want to really speak about the spaces in between. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Uncanny Valley theory, and if you're not, I'm going to explain it to you a little bit. It refers to robots in particular, and it's a curve that goes like this and says that human beings, us, are more satisfied with either Pac-Man-like, heavily pixelated, non-human-looking objects, or with amazingly human-looking renderings. We don't like anything that is in between. That's why I think Second Life was such a flop, because it's at the bottom of the Uncanny Valley. Now, SimCity is a great example of one side of the Uncanny Valley, and it's one of the first instances where we felt completely immersed, really part of a world that we could build, that we could make, and that was not the one that we were used to. And it shows how our power to really fill in the dots and fill in the pixels and live into a dimension that Rebecca Allen, who's a really great artist and theoretician of all these matters, called liminal spaces, the spaces in between. The spaces in between are the ones that are being made even more evident by all the different gestural interfaces that we're used to before. Here you're looking at the real Uncanny Valley. You start with the Tamagotchi, absolutely not human, but we're completely invested in that cursed, damned object that has ruined our lives for so many years. And then instead on the other side is the Wii, and then, you know, when, what's it called, Natal? No, what's it called, the one Microsoft is working on? It's Natal, Project Natal. When Microsoft will come out with Project Natal, we won't even need the wands. It will be completely gestural, and there are other companies working this seamless connection between our body and the digital world. And of course, Areacode, the company, the design company that you're all probably familiar with, has been pioneering this idea. And I'm sure you're all familiar already with this particular application of their idea. On the one hand, you see Pac-Man just because we want Pac-Man in the collection. We'll get there. But this is not really, it's an application of Pac-Man. And this is already a few years old. So, you know, a few years in technology. You have a phone, a cell phone. On the screen, there's the game. It's not really Pac-Man, but you are the equivalent of Pac-Man. And then there's this skull on the screen called Papa Samedi that wants to eat you. Your screen is portraying the streets of Manhattan, and that's where you are. Papa Samedi exists only on the screen. And still, you're running for your life, terrified because this thing that exists only on the cell phone wants to eat you. That's what we're talking about. And that's where the space for design in the future really lies. It's an amazing space, and this is what Areacode uses to talk about that space. I got this from Kevin Slavin. On the one hand, you have the physical world, you have store windows, bottom labels and billboards. On the other hand, you have the sponsored search, Flickr, whatever. The space in between, which right now is still kind of possessed by different interfaces like the RFID tags and other tags, one day will be even more seamless, but that's the space where we live most of the time and that we're comfortable with. This is what Talk to Me is going to be about and more. And really, I would appreciate if you went to the blog, if you sent comments, if you spread the word only amongst your community. We don't want to open it up to the whole world because I'm so tired of comments coming from uninformed people. So, but we would really, really love it if you participated. And then the last thing that I want to talk to you about is the thing that made me the proudest in the past 6 months. I'm sorry, I just want to share it with you again, which is the acquisition of the ad sign in the collection of MoMA. I think that it took a long time. It was a long time in the making because I had to convince so many people. Why? Because it's a non-acquisition. It's not, usually you buy or you acquire an object, put it in the warehouse of MoMA, it belongs to you, and you conserve it. And of course, the ad sign belongs to everybody. But if the idea is that curators are there to educate the public as to what good design is, because that's our role, that's the mission of MoMA. And if the ad sign is a great example of design because it is a symbol recuperated from the Middle Ages that maintained its significance and its value throughout the centuries and got reused, recycled, given new life by an electrical engineer in 1971 to become the symbol that is part of our identity in the contemporary times, excuse me, isn't that all we want from design? And it's also elegant. So that was such a condensation of design qualities that it was almost like a must in the collection. But it presented a series of conceptual, as our lawyers at MoMA said, oh, this acquisition is challenging not legally, only conceptually. That was so great. Our lawyers at MoMA are fantastic. So conceptually, legally no problem, because it's basically as if you had the ad sign in the air and we captured its shadow on the wall. And we printed it there in American typewriter because that's the closest typeface to the one that was used in 1971. That was on a Model 55 teletype. But, conceptually, that's all. But as soon as we announced this acquisition with a blog post, there was like a storm of comments, pros and cons. It was fantastic because we had no idea that this would happen. Some people didn't read the blog post carefully. That's why I don't want everybody to comment on the post. I've had enough. It's like, what does MoMA want? Now we cannot use the ad sign anymore. And we had said, it's everybody's. And when people ask MoMA to use the ad sign, we say, oh my God, it's on your typewriter. Go ahead, it's in your computer. Use it. We recommend American typewriter, and we ask you to print the typeface, so in the label, so that people know what you're using. But some people got really angry, and some people were really supportive. But I find it wonderful that the reaction was so visceral and so not limited to the world of design. I think that this opens up the field to all of us to do what we already do, to kind of legitimize what we already do. We're so much about using things and not possessing them anymore. This is about, for instance, zip cars and all the other services on the internet. It's about MailChimp. It's about, I was saying chimp mail. No, MailChimp. It's about all of these different services that we use and that we don't need to possess. And it's about also tagging. The idea, we could go on with buildings if we wanted to. We could go around the world and saying, that's why I'm showing you the 747, because that's another ambition of mine, to have it in the collection, but it doesn't fit in the museum. So you could tag it, right? You could say, this is MoMA. Of course, you need to have limits. And you should tag only objects that you really cannot have. It's not fair to tag objects that cost too much money. Then the game would not be, it's just not fair. So if it's a problem of money, then you know what? Raise your funds as a curator, do your due diligence and find a way. But if it's too big, if it belongs to everybody, if it's either in inner and outer space, all the games are open. So I really feel that this connection between your work as designers, the way we all live, and the way a museum operates as a mirror that makes you feel validated and the world understand what design is about, is something that is progressing. We're all working on the same path, and it's a great moment both for us and for you. Thank you very much. Tina, you're the MC, so you let us know how many questions, when we have, there you are. And if you want to ask questions, I am at your disposal. It's a great day because my sister is coming to visit me with her whole family. for the first time in decades. So I'm just super happy. I just have to go at 1 o'clock to pick up this monster car. I've never driven such a big car, but there are many kids. So if you see me around with a very politically incorrect SUV and I'm not able to make turns, just pretend you don't see me.
Before we start with questions, is there anyone that needs to run out?
Oh yeah, if anybody needs to run out to go to work, please do. Completely understood.
But
Yeah.
I would love to have a few minutes for questions and answers.
Yeah, she would love to have a few minutes for questions and answers. I'm translating in the microphone.
Who wants to start?
Anybody wants to start? No? Hello? Oh, okay, go ahead. Please. Yeah, moment guy. You're not moment guy? Oh, sorry. You're next to the moment guy.
Don Norman wrote a section of your last
Yes?
everyday thing. He had a theory about last year that designers almost always do their innovations in response to what technologists and scientists.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Don Norman hates designers. No, he does. I mean, I know him very well. He's like a wonderful curmudgeon. He saw me after many years and said, "Hi, Paola, I saw Design in the Elastic Mind. I really hated it." I mean, I said, "Thank you." But no. This idea of innovation belonging to one or to the other is so moot. You know what I'm saying? It's like innovation demands everybody. It's called disruptive innovation because when it's only in the hands of scientists and technicians, it can be used by people. Designers are the interface. Sometimes designers are the innovators. Sometimes the innovators are artists, like, John Jordan invented the 900 number in the 60s. So I just find it so, when people say, innovation is ours, designers are only that, I'm like, okay. I don't even respond. It's funny because Bruce Nussbaum in his blog, when Don Norman said that, quoted me from an exhibition as a counter, and I said to him, I'm not a counter, I don't care. You know what I'm saying? It's like if they want to think that way, it's no problem. Innovation is much more complex than a light bulb going off. Yeah? Mm-hmm.
I have a question about tagging. So you mentioned tagging for your time.
The question is about tagging.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, from the museum point of view, what is tagging? Why is it of interest to you, and where do you see that going?
From the museum point of view, why is it of interest to me and where do I see that going? As I mentioned to you, I think it's more, there have to be some ethical rules regarding tagging, because I think that money cannot be the discriminating point. It has to be something that really defies the laws of physics, or just that inhabits that space in between that cannot be had. But I think it's very important. The more design branches out and becomes conceptual, digital, liminal, in outer space, the more we need to adapt our methods, not only our rules, but more our methods of collecting, right? Because once again, our job is to show a great example of modern design. We have the modern thing, which we might talk about in another conversation, but it's our job to keep on recognizing design. We cannot just close our eyes because it's too big or it's evanescent. So the idea of tagging, we were discussing it, we had a seminar recently about should we have buildings in the collection, right? Because some museums have buildings in their collections or have buildings under their responsibility. That's a different matter. So when it comes to building, the idea of the outside cannot be applied that easily. It's another field, it's a matter of money, responsibility, etc. But if it's a satellite, the idea behind the 747, for instance, was to make a deal with an airline company. And I had checked with the aviation authority, you can put the acquisition number on the outside, but it was not about changing the plane. It was, from the outside, it looked like it was the MoMA plane, but in truth, it was a licensing deal whereby the airline would keep both all the profits and all the responsibility. And say I was looking into airlines that went through New York with 747s, of course, and if you, by any chance, were to take that craft that day, it was by chance you would get a different boarding pass that would be collectible. It was just a whole almost performance to let you know. And of course, is it democratic? Not everybody can buy a ticket. It's true. But I used, when I was a child, to be taken by my father to the airport to watch planes. So you can still do it. It's not completely accessible, but you can have a sense. So I think there needs to be rules, but I see the future as needing to go in this direction, not just wanting to go in this direction. There will be more and more objects. I was looking also at the SARC mark. I don't know, you know the SARC mark, right? It was that symbol that was for sale a few months ago, that was launched by a company. It's like a shift out something and you download it, and it's a symbol that you put at the end of a phrase to make people realize that you're making a joke, which would be very helpful for me because my sense of humor is very often misunderstood. I don't know if it's ever caught up, but like that's another that you can buy. So that's not tagging. And right now we're dealing with digital fonts. We want to acquire digital fonts. We gotta buy them or get them donated. And we're arguing, how do you conserve digital fonts? Do you need the code? Don't you need the code? So tagging is really for extreme situations. Yeah.
I wondered what your impression was of the design triennial.
My impression of the design triennial, I haven't seen it yet. The night of the opening was my birthday, so I didn't go. And then I've been traveling ever since, and I want to go really calmly, and I haven't gone yet. So I don't have an impression yet. Do you want, does anybody?
I just thought it's interesting because I've read Carrie Jacobs' response to it, which was that she missed the idea of design being aesthetically beautiful.
Carrie Jacobs said that she missed design being aesthetically beautiful. Well, that's an important point. See, and I don't want to criticize my colleagues at the Cooper Hewitt because I haven't seen the show, but I still do believe that elegance, beauty is very, very subjective at this point. It used to be objective, not anymore. But elegance and a certain pursuit of aesthetics, intentional, it might be punk aesthetics, I don't care, but a certain intention needs to show, it's beauty or elegance doesn't cost more than squalor, so I find it really a pose on some designers and on some curators, but I'm not saying the Cooper Hewitt, but I've seen exhibitions in the past that refuse completely aesthetics. For us at MoMA, it's always very important, at least an intention, like last year there was something called Rough Cut, where we had very unpleasant things. Doesn't mean that they were not really possessed by a strong idea, which is what we're looking for, and that idea has to be also aesthetics. Well, then I thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Tina, Moment, MailChimp, and thank you, everybody. And please go on the blog and send us ideas, yours or others. Okay, thank you.